My name is Reina. I am 40 years old. Starting with my childhood, I was born to loving parents. At the time, my dad was really strong in the faith. And I just from what I can remember, or at least like heard from stories from them, like they were good. Then they had my sister, and things changed. My dad went away from the faith, and he was into rock and roll and marijuana and drugs and stuff. So his life, from what I know, even in most of my childhood, was on again, off again Christian. My mom was similar to that as well. He went to jail, and that's when my parents divorced. And then I remember moving a lot between Seattle and Pensacola from the time that I was like 3 months old until I was in third grade. One of the prominent years of my life was that I keep thinking about a lot was when I was 5 years old. There's a time where I was sexually abused by a neighbor. I was at sometime around that point, my mother had an episode, and she ended up losing us for a season, and we were in foster care before my dad came and got me. There's a season where my dad tried to ask my stepdad, because later my mom remarried, to adopt me, but my Oma wouldn't allow him to do that. I became very close with my Oma. My Oma ended up raising me for, I want to say on and off again from third grade until I graduated high school. They were really prominent in my life. So I remember after third grade, that's when I lived in Seattle, Washington, and moved all the way to Pensacola, Florida, and that's where I've stayed for the majority of the rest of my childhood into my high school years. I lived on again and off again with my Oma and Papa, who became secondary mom and dad to me, and they became very important in my life. They attended all of my graduations. They attended all of any sort of event that I was, whether it was drama or if it was a church thing or anything like that. Through the years where my dad was on again, off again Christian, I would attend church. Raised in the Southern Baptist Church. I was introduced to Pentecostal with my youth pastor in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade. He was different, and I wanted to know why. And I visited Fire Church, which was also a school of ministry at the time in Pensacola. It came from the Brownsville revival that happened in Pensacola. I was living in Pensacola at the time too when that happened. So like there were like tidbits where the Lord just really gave me nuggets of who He is and what He was doing in my life. I remember in high school, my mom remarrying for the divorced and remarried for the third time. My dad divorced and remarried again in end of my middle school years and the beginning of my high school years. She was 7 years older than me, so that was really, really tough for me. But over the years, I got to know her and got close, and she still is. She's like the person that I talk to the most and kind of get to know my dad through. I try to talk to my dad and have small connections with him, but it's just difficult. But she tells me all the time that he's proud of me and excited for the things that I did. Oh my gosh, got in an argument with my with my grandparents. I was living with my grandparents at the time and got into an argument with them and ended up moving out of my grandparents' house. So I wasn't my mom and my dad weren't in my life my senior year. This was before prom, and I ended up living out of my car for 9 months from the time senior prom until I graduated high school. And that was a huge turning point. I was in a homosexual relationship with a girl, and what I felt was love, but realized that a relationship is a relationship no matter what. And at one point I wanted to end my life, and I ended up going to a park and laying on the ground and looking up at the stars and remembering that, okay, Lord, like, I think this is it. I think I just need to end my life. And that's when the Lord really spoke to me. And he made it very clear. He's like, there are some people who care for you. I want you to really reach out to them. That was my old youth pastor and another female leader that had, because Fire Church ended up moving to North Carolina. So they had me, the Lord really was like, no, you have purpose. And I made a 180 turn and really kind of gave my life back to the Lord then. And when I did that, I made a call, which was the hardest call I've ever made. And then I went up for Thanksgiving, 2004. So it was after I graduated high school. It was in my first year of college. There was a hurricane that happened. It was a category 5 hurricane. So it tore through Pensacola. It was right before Katrina. So not a lot of people remember Hurricane Ivan, but that was also during that time. And so my classes ended early because of the storm. So whatever I made grade wise for my first, 10 weeks of school, that was the grade that you got, because there was no way that they could return back to school. And so with that, I went and visited, and I packed everything in my car, drove to North Carolina and visited, and stayed with the girl youth leader that I knew, and she helped me find roommates and get established so that in January after Christmas, I would move in with these roommates. I was getting school money that I hadn't received yet, and I think I ended up getting like $2,500, which I took $2,500, everything I owned in the car, and I moved after Christmas. I spent time with my Oma and Papa. I made up with them and apologized, touched base with my dad, apologized, and packed everything up, and after Christmas moved to North Carolina, and that was the beginning of a whole new life. During that trip at Thanksgiving was when I met my husband, and didn't realize it at the time, but I thought he was a youth because he looked very young, and I looked young at the time as well. And he was praying deliverance prayer with me, with my youth leader, just praying through the past relationship that I was in, praying through a lot of hurt and bitterness, and once again, just to turn my life around. I thought he was cute, but then I thought he was a youth, so I was like, totally too young for me. Found out that he wasn't, and that's when I went to the refuge, their first service at the Central Park, and that became my church when I moved to North Carolina. I really was in that healing time, and so through that I got to know him a bunch, started to see what ministry would look like, helped out with the youth, helped out with kids, did some drama skits for the church. I was just really healing from all of that. And then I was also still going to school. So I was working on my associates for just the associates for arts and sciences, I think is just the general 2 years of school, because I wasn't exactly sure what direction I was going in to. And through that, I loved the sociology and psychology courses. And that's where I started to want to know what I could do. And counseling was something that was starting to stir in my heart. So then through that, I started to get to know Eddie. And in that, I started to form a bondness. I went home for a season. I did end up seeing my past girlfriend plus her friends, and was just really struggling with, direction and love and what that looked like. But his mind kept coming back, and that prevented me from falling back into old ways. And I'm like, all right, Lord, like if I can just have someone like him, not realizing that's who the Lord had for me, I will continue to follow your path. And so I didn't do anything, like I didn't fall back into temptation. I stood my ground, and after that visit, came back and started to really get to know Eddie, and just start to really participate in ministry and really start to heal. I applied for the Fire School of Ministry, so I attended that for 2.5 years. But in the time that I was doing ministry at the refuge, Eddie and I were talking, and we had youth on Mondays, and one of the Mondays was Valentine's Day. And so I thought, okay, we had been talking every Monday after youth. He had to drive a student 30, 45 minutes away. And so on the way home, he always wanted to talk to me, and I thought this was great. So, but I was like, it's Valentine's Day, he's not gonna wanna talk to me. And he was leaving to take the youth home, and he shook his phone at me, and I was like, game on. I was like, okay, Lord, I got you. And there was a lot of girls that knew that I was like crushing on him. So we did our normal conversation, and near the end of it, I said, well, before we end, I just want to let you know that I like you. And he was like, okay, cool. And I was like, all right, I gotta go. And I hung up, and I was like, stupid. Not realizing in the background and finding out later that he was like flabbergasted because he liked me. And we just weren't really sure, because our mentor and his roommate, was very protective over me, and we weren't sure how he would respond, and we were just, unsure. But through that, we continued to do ministry and continued to talk. We ended up getting together that June. So we had the conversation. We continued to just have our conversation and talk from February to June, and just take a break from each other and not try to rush it. Our mentor did find out, and he was a little upset, but he just gave us advice, and we kind of took that advice and didn't rush it. In June, we took the kids to Cedar Point, and when we came on the way to Cedar Point, they borrowed my car, and it blew up. So we ended up having to, getting my car to where his parents lived, and they ended up helping me find an engine and replace it and all that. I introduced, his mom and sister introduced themselves to me, and then I introduced myself to his dad, which was kind of funny because he's really bad with introductions. And I remember seeing the pink picture. So there's this famous pink picture that we took. Friends of ours was learning how to take pictures with the camera. So it was a month before we went on this trip. And we were just talking. I was wearing a pink shirt, and two friends, him and another friend, jokingly got pink shirts and wore it the same day. And we were having lunch at the park after church, and we were sitting on this rock, and he had his hand behind me, but we weren't even touching, but you can't really tell in the picture, and it looks like a couple picture, but we're both wearing pink shirts, and that became the pink, the famous pink shirt, the beginning of our, beautiful friendship. And so he then starts to really play a role in my healing, really starts to play a role in how we grow as a couple, but also in the Lord, and that ministry and the Lord was our foundation. But I will never forget the time that, so we got together in June. I think it was August. So 2 months later, we went on a trip where a group of us was on a ministry trip, and we were we were like speaking and ministering to these youth, and it was near Myrtle Beach. And his sister called me, which was interesting, while we were on the trip, because she knew we were on the trip. We just left. He just graduated from, did he graduate? No. They just left from visiting. That's what it was. They just left from visiting. And when they left from visiting us in North Carolina, they were on their way to Ohio, back to Ohio. We went to Myrtle Beach to do this ministry opportunity with a bunch of like, they were all the same age, a group of us from the ministry school. And sister called me and let me know that his best friend, like a brother, had got killed in Iraq. And I ran to the altar at the place we were at, and I cried, and I was like, Lord, what am I supposed to do? Like, who am I supposed to tell? Like, they hadn't called him yet. They just wanted to make me aware. They couldn't get a hold of anybody except me, because they were trying to get a hold of his, roommate and mentor, the one that was leading this whole trip. And I went to the altar and I was like, Lord, and I'm like crying. Don't know this gentleman at all, only know of him. Talked to him once while he was in Iraq. He worked on trying to get out my country accent, because every once in a while my country accent comes out. And he, so that it was right when we first got together. So like I was introduced as his girlfriend. So I ran to the altar and I was praying and I was like, Lord, what am I supposed to do? And it was like I felt his heart, both the Lord's and Eddie's at the time, my husband, and or not my husband, my boyfriend at the time. And he told me, he's like, well, I want you to go support your husband. And I was like, I'm so sorry, Lord. I think you misspoke. I just said, no. And he's like, yes, I want you. So like in an argument with the Lord about him being my husband. And so I finally got up after praying and arguing with the Lord and was like, okay, Lord, I hear you. So I went and found the leaders, and I was like, look, this is what I just found out. Well, we couldn't find Eddie because he had already gotten the phone call from his mom and sister, and he was crying. And so I continued to cry. I just felt the Lord's heart. I felt his heart. He ended up preaching that day, and then I left with him, and the church was like, you need to go. So majority of the group stayed. Me, his roommate, and him left to Ohio. Later did I find out that after he got that call and was praying, the Lord told him, he's like, your wife's going to go and support you. So that's the first time that evening we both said I love you to each other for the first time. And I think we ended up in a tree. I laugh because it's no longer there, at his one of his parents' property. It's where they live now. It's not where they were living. It was just their like trucking company property. We had our first kiss, and we just continued to just trust the Lord that was bringing us together. And one of the things that I like to talk about when it comes to my husband and I relationship is like it. Just because the Lord brought us together and told us that we were husband and wife, it was not peachy keen. Like we struggled in our relationship. Even after he proposed, there were many times where we got into fights, and we were called off the engagement a couple of times. But one of the things we did was persist in the hard things. And then even after we got married, we both realized that we needed to seek counseling, and that counseling was really prominent. We never had couple counseling. I mean, we had premarital counseling, but we never had like couples counseling. We just got counseling separately. And then we learned to have conversations together. And through that, we grew. And we also waited to have kids. So we didn't have kids until after like 3 years later. But we continued to do ministry together, and that was our heart. And we just grew together. I think that is so key, is to grow together. And like seeking after the Lord also brought us together. And there were times where I felt I was ahead of him, or he was ahead of me, but like we always came back even kilter with the Lord. And so through that, we did ministry together. We've had many different church hurts through the times, and we tell people like there's a time where we worked at a church and the pastor cheated on his wife, and we had to walk through that. And the church didn't handle that well. It was a campus church, and so that there was a struggle there. There was a time where the pastor said that we weren't doing enough, and even though we grew the youth from 6 kids to 40 by the time in a like year's time. But every time my husband and I prayed about it and discussed, we just got back up. Every time we were knocked down, we got back up, and we trust that it's man and not God. And we found another place, another community of people, and trust that the Lord would bring people in our lives that were going to help us in our growth. And we've had to make hard choices. The last church hurt that we experienced was at a church. It was our youth leader that we have known for 20 years. He was with us at the beginning of our relationship, and he got arrested. And I thought it was a joke, and so did my husband. Come to find out, that was true. What he was arrested for, which was indecencies with minors. And that was the first time it broke us. It hurt. It was a gut punch. We did life with them, and we just trusted the Lord. So it took a little while for us to get back up, but we once again found a church home that we ended up back at the refuge, and they welcomed us in, and our kids, and it felt like coming home. And we continue to move forward and trust the Lord. And we've had friends come and go, but we've always stayed true to who we are and true to the path that the Lord was leading us. I mean, we've moved in and out of North Carolina 2 or 3 times, and the Lord keeps bringing us back. So we're like, all right, North Carolina is our place. That's where we're meant to be and grow. And through that, I got my associates. I ended up getting my bachelor's in psychology, and then my master's in school counseling. And then currently I am working on my master's in clinical mental health, because I really feel strongly that the Lord's leading me to counsel. Specifically want to work with kids, specifically kids with autism, and also to do play therapy and really be a light to parents in that aspect. So currently I'm at a Christian practice, private practice counseling place, and I could not be more happy. I love all the people that I work with, and my supervisor is absolutely amazing, and I'm excited to see where the Lord takes me in this path with finishing up. But I've always had a heart to counsel, always had a heart for people and kids and youth and college age individuals, to just help them in the Lord, but help them in their mental health and in that process. And knowing that I can combine those 2 things has just been a blessing. And I graduate in December, and I'm excited. I know that the Lord has put counseling in my heart, and He spoke that to me multiple times. And I've always had a heart for kids, and have 3 wonderful children. Sarah, who is my autistic daughter, she's definitely the one that has inspired me to be there for more autistic children in counseling, because of how difficult it was to find a counselor for her. We have amazing counselor with her, and he's even trying to help me in this process of counseling, and because he even said like he can't take on any more clients. So the need is definitely out there, but I also want to be just a light to families as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. So that's my story in His glory.